Hi, I'm Ashley from Sunny Maid, and today, as I finish up my quilt, I'm going to walk you through a few different tips that'll help you have a few cleaner blocks. Today on Last Blocks, I am finishing up the Spooky Sampler. I did it through my favorite quilt store. They did it as a sew-along a couple years back. I started it then, and as with most of us, it was a work in progress for quite a while, for a couple years, as I packed it away and brought it out. Who really wants to work on Halloween when it's after Halloween? I mean, really. This is a super fun quilt. We have ghosts and candies and pumpkins and bats. So I have those all together, 2 strips of them. We also have, well, let's get this the right direction. Cats, more candy, and spiders. And it was actually, as I was finishing up this candy blocks, the last of my candy blocks, that I thought, you know what, I have a few tips. So instead of just you helping me finish my quilt today, we're actually going to do I'm going to give you some tips to help make them nice, clean, straight, flat, and make the points all come together so you get exactly what you want at the end of your sewing. My first tip is always, always, always look at your pattern and make sure that you are cutting your pieces out at the exact size that they ask for. Not a little bit too big, not a little bit too little. If you cut them out exactly, these pattern makers know what they're doing. They'll go together properly, and they'll come out the size that you're looking. Here I am working on a flying geese, and we're using the stitch and flip method. This isn't exactly my favorite, but one of my tips on this one is, so you draw the line on the diagonal, and then you're supposed to stitch along the line. You're gonna trim here and fold it back and press it. So my tip here is that instead of doing it exactly on the line, you want to do it just slightly off, so that when you flip it, you're going to make it a little more square. And that leads us into our second one. If you'll notice, when you flip it back, if you haven't trimmed this part off yet and you flip it back, you can make a nice triangle if you're lining up the edges. And this will keep your flying geese more square along the edges and your diagonal perfectly. My fourth tip has to do with the way we press our blocks. Here I did 2 at a time half square triangles, and now it's time to press them open. I found this tip, Donna Jordan from Jordan Fabrics. I love this tip. I've only recently started using it, but it makes my lines so nice and crisp. Let me actually pull this one over. So instead of ironing it just like this, what she actually recommends is pressing it open with your fingers first, and then bring your iron on top of it. And the reason you want to do this is it makes this nice straight line all the way across. Sometimes when we just iron them open, this line here, this seam in the middle, will get a little wonky or not straight. And so if you take the time to finger press it open first, then you'll have a nice straight line when it's actually time to go and iron it. My next tip, tip number 5, is to make sure that all of your seams are going in the same direction. This will help you nest your seams as you start to sew the basic blocks together. Tip number 6 is trim, trim, trim. I cannot emphasize the importance of trimming each block. So here I did half square triangles, and then after I press them open, I'm going to trim them so that they are the perfect size to go into the next block. And this kind of goes back to the thing. Make sure you're checking exactly the size of fabric that you need to when you're cutting out. When you are working with directional fabric, see this one right here? These have these cute little spiders. The spider webs come down, forming a stripe. Make sure you're paying attention when you start putting your blocks together and sewing them. On this one, let me think how I did this. So this one, we did the diagonal. These two pieces went together. For my half square triangles, I did the diagonal this way, and then in order to get my second half and my diagonals going the right direction, or stripes going the right direction, I did that diagonal from top right to bottom left. So when you start putting your pieces together, you can kind of look at it and then flip it back and go, okay, that's gonna do what I want it to do. So if you're working with directional fabric, make sure you are paying attention as you start to put your blocks together. Okay, as you start to sew these together, this is going to come in to a pinwheel. We're going to put them right on top of each other. I want you to note that as you open this up, that these seams should be going right down the middle. So all the way from one corner to the other, those seams are going to line up perfectly. If you have sewn or pressed your seams in the correct direction, they're going to nest, and it's going to cause them to nest all the way down in this little slot so that they can go together perfectly. Okay, once again, we have this all sewn together. I'm bringing my rulers back in, and I'm making sure that I trim at every step along the way. I think this is such an important thing. If you want your quilt to come back with perfect edges, everything squared up nicely, you just have to keep trimming, trimming, trimming. This next part I wanted to talk to you about, I had actually just filmed, and then I realized that I had been pushing my button. When I thought I was turning my phone on, I was turning it off, and when I was turning it off, I thought I was turning it on, and it's a big mess. So let me try to walk you through this last tip without having to take apart my whole block. This is the tip that I thought was going to be most important and why I decided to do this video. So this is where we line up our point with our seam. And it's, if you want a nice crisp block, you have to work hard to make sure that you get everything lined up all nicely. So what we do is you start by laying the end piece on top of it, and you line up the edges right exactly where you're going to sew. I then take my pin and I put it here at the point of my flying geese on the outside, and go all the way down through the second layer of fabric. Now, if I pull it back, see how my pin lines up perfectly with that line. And so what this is gonna do, it's gonna line up your point with your seam right here. You then put your pin, you then wanna make sure that once you have those lined up, you have this edge lined up. And with it already being sewn, it's a little difficult to see, but you wanna make sure that your edges are lined up. Once those are lined up, you put your pin in it, okay? And then you're gonna do your 1/4 inch seam right along the edge. Now, as you go to stitch, your seam, your line, your stitch seam is gonna go right through where this pin is, because you want your stitch seam to go right at the point of that flying geese. If it doesn't, you're gonna end up like I did over here, and you're gonna end up chopping off your point of your flying geese. Then, once you stitch it on there, you're gonna press it open. Now, when I press it open, I always try to find the direction that has the least amount of bulk. So because there's so much bulk here, I don't really wanna bend it back on itself. So I pressed it towards the middle. So once you press it out flat, it's still bulky, yes. I'm not an open seam ironer, but if you notice, this point is definitely a lot better than that point because I cut off that point. So this is going to be a very valuable tip that you are gonna need to use, that you're gonna want to use to make sure your points line up with your seams. And there you have it, my finished quilt. It's all put together and I'm ready to sandwich and quilt. All finished. Here's the bottom. Look how cute that turned out. And then the top, pretty much the same, but it is just in a different order. On the back, I put chains, super fun. And then around the edges, I did an orange with the chains as well. So I love this this quilt pattern. It came out super cute. I hope you enjoyed my tips. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you next week, and happy sewing.